Hey, good morning! It's Monday here at Propelio.
Oh.
We're going to try something a little new for going forward. We're going to do more of a podcast-y style type thing, I guess. And I say that only because there's a computer on the desk. That's the only thing that makes a difference.
That's a big difference, though.
Anyway, today we're going to be talking about the rat race, the retirement. Daniel's going to kind of not expose himself, but
That'd be
expound on his knowledge.
Okay.
Of going from a zero to a hero in 6 months flat.
That's one thing I love about working with you. You always use words that I don't know or understand, so I feel like I'm around smart people when I talk to you. Well, good. So if we can explain what expound means, we'll go forward from there. But
I don't think it's a real word.
It's all good. What we did here, though, is I wanted to give a big shout out to Mr. Jeremy for getting out of that 9-to-5, firing your boss the other day. I was extremely excited to see that post from you, man. And I remember being there and remembering what it was like to be able to walk away. And big shout out to Jeremy for getting that knocked out. Congratulations for dropping the 9-to-5. But I was going to go ahead because you mentioned it, I don't remember, a month or so ago, saying something about I needed to tell more about how I got started in this and that first property I did and how I moved forward from there.
Yes, that was me, and I take full credit.
Oh, man. So, man, I picked up the real estate bug at a really young age. I was probably 19 or so whenever I first started talking about real estate and wanting to do stuff with real estate. Read a few books and moved forward from there and bought my first investment property at 20. I'm not good with dates and numbers, so I hate talking about dates and numbers. I think I was 21.
Your age is not a date. I guess it is a number, but whatever.
I was like 21, I think. Okay. 21 or 23. I was probably 23. But I bought my very first one at 23 years old, and I flipped it and turned around and made a pretty good profit off of it. But I didn't retire then. It took me a long time to figure out how to retire, and I think I'd like to talk a little bit more about that today and kind of go through the steps necessary to get away from the 9-to-5 and the steps necessary to truly allow yourself the passive income to not need to work anymore.
Yeah, because I think in the real estate world, you can make a ton of money, and we've talked about your mistakes here on the show before, and those mistakes being having a huge wallet but not having a future wallet, living in the now versus living in the future, and with anything, it always comes that you could really take the answer we talked about with the CMAs and the valuing. It depends.
Right.
Depends on what your goals are at that moment in time. So
that's exactly what happened to me. Is I got a really fat wallet, but I didn't get any everyday money. I don't say you have to, because there's exceptions to every rule, but you really need multiple sources of income. And all I ever learned up front was to go for the big paydays. Right. So I was really quickly getting a lot of money, but if I stopped working, I stopped making money. Right. And that doesn't really pan out very well for retirement. So what I ended up doing up front is I built up a large capital reserve, and I also built up a lot of debt because I just wasn't educated on money. I wasn't educated on all that stuff. So I got a couple of really big flips knocked out, went from being dead broke to having a couple $100,000, and that was life-changing for me. But I went out and I bought the big house, I bought the cars, I bought all that stuff. So now I had like $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 a month in debt.
And now he has a closet full of watches, and he only wears one, and he only wears the same T-shirt every single day.
I changed up my life. I mean, I made a lot of mistakes, but
don't we all?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm here to talk about today. Not only was those mistakes, but how I got to the retirement so fast. It only took me about 6 months to really kick my 9-to-5 to a point where I no longer had to work again, and that's what that's what I want to talk about today.
Let's get in it.
So let's lead up to where I was when I finally decided I screwed up. And like 23 years old, I grabbed my first flip, made it through that by stroke of luck, whatever you want to call it. At 23, I made it through, and it took me almost 2 years to wrap it up. So I don't know if you want to call it a flip or an extended vacation with the house or whatnot, but it was a property that I purchased and had every intention of flipping, but I couldn't afford it and any other house at the exact same time. So I bought it and moved into it. It wasn't like I bought it, moved into it, and then sold it and made some money. I bought it to flip it. I just had to live in it to do it.
Is that the one you made like all those mistakes early and all the, I'm not going to say illegal, but maybe not the most legal way of doing things?
There was a lot of illegal stuff going on there that, maybe.
But we're not lawyers. We're not attorneys, so we can't say if it was or it was not.
It was. But, I mean, God, I guess I'll talk about that for just a second. So the very first property I ever did was a strip of 28 townhomes that all went vacant at one time near downtown Dallas. And with 28 townhomes going vacant near downtown Dallas, A lot of homeless people moved in, a lot of prostitutes, a lot of drug dealers, a lot of drug addicts. So it got pretty nasty down there. And, you know, people were living in them and they were vacant. So when I found this area, it was just stroke of luck. It wasn't planned. It wasn't intentional. Like literally, I went on a lunch break with a friend. We worked down there in Deep Ellum, and we just went on a lunch break. And on our way back from lunch, there was a garage sale, and we were like, let's just kill some time during lunch. So we stopped at this garage sale, and we kind of noticed that every house was kind of boarded up, and we were like, what's going on over here? And they're like, oh, well, they're all vacant, or you know, we've been living here for over a year and no one's made us pay any rent or nothing. We were renting beforehand, and you know, so it just kind of piqued some curiosity. We started calling up. There were some realtor signs out front, calling up some phone numbers, and before long I ended up under contract with one of these properties. But the property I put under contract was the absolute cheapest one on the street. It was, I think they had it listed for $45,000. It was on tax rolls for probably a little over $70,000. It was like $76,000 was on tax rolls for, and me being a stupid kid without any understanding of investments, I was like, all right, well, this is a good deal. They're selling it for 45. It's worth 76, and I can fix it up. So
right. So there was no concept of ARV minus repairs.
Did not even know what it was.
No formula. You just saw it's worth 70 on the taxes, and you could buy it for 45.
Right, and
it could take 100,000 to fix it, but you were clueless to that.
I was clueless to that. I worked construction at that point in time for close to 10 years, so I fully intended when I bought it to do all the repairs myself. So I wasn't too scared about that. But the property had all the copper stolen, all the plumbing, all the electrical. Most of the windows were broken out of it. So whenever I got it under contract, that was the condition it was in. To make the matters worse, when they stole all the copper, the water meter at the street was faulty, so it wasn't turning all the way off. So it just slowly seeped into the house over the 6 months, and there was mold all over the carpet. It stunk in there. There was feces, human feces, and crack pipes.
This is all before you even bought it.
This was all before I even bought it. So we go through that. I decide, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and buy this. After I get through the process of figuring out what a contract was, how to contract it, I call the real estate agent up, and the real estate agent's like, hey, are you pre-approved? I'm like, I don't even know how to get pre-approved. What's that mean? He's like, well, call up your bank and see if you can get a loan. If you can get a loan, call me back. He wasn't wanting to deal with me, so I call up the bank, and I get a hold of Gretchen. I'm not going to say her last name. I'm just going to say Gretchen. I get a hold of Gretchen, and she was like, yeah, we can get you a loan. You're pre-approved for up to like $80,000. I'm sitting here thinking.
Is this pre-08?
This was 08. This was like months before the crash.
Okay,
like
so that's
literally
why. Yeah.
months before the crash. Like I had no clue what was going on in the market. I was absolutely stupid, and I still am. Right. But literally, like it was like 2 months before things crashed. So all of that to be said, I go ahead and I get the pre-approval for 80, and I'm sitting here thinking in the back of my head, well, they're asking for 45. I'm pre-approved for 80,000. I was broke at the time. I was making like $10 an hour, and that's about the best loan I could get was 80,000. But yeah, I'm like done. They'll loan me 80. This is 45.
I got a house.
I got a house. So they send out an appraisal, and the appraiser comes out, and like I told you, there's no copper. There's no copper, no electrical, no plumbing, no air conditioning, no windows, and the place is absolutely trashed. And I'm not aware that there's lending standards and all this appraisal type of stuff. So they send an appraiser out, and he shows up, and the front door's boarded up. So I have to get a screw gun to unscrew the front door and open it up so his little Beamer driving ass can get in the house. Oh, I was so mad at him. I was mad at him that day. But he goes through the house, and I'm like, yeah, I was mad.
Sounds like there's still a little bit of resentment there.
Well, he screwed my life up for a couple of months. Not a couple of months, for about 30 days. Because when he walked through the house, he's like, what's going on here? And I was like, well, I'm going to put granite in, I'm going to paint, I'm going to put new flooring in, I'm going to do all this stuff. And he's like, well, that's great. Are you planning on doing all that before you close? I'm like, hell no, I'm not going to do all that before I close. And I was like, that'd be stupid. Why would I do all that to a house I don't own? And he's like, well, you're not going to get a loan without all that stuff. You're not going to get a loan without electrical, plumbing, air conditioning, windows, and a roof. So needless to say, that was the start of a really bad month. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, real quickly though, just because I think it's a funny story, let's get into. So the appraiser comes back, says you're not getting this loan unless you have a roof, you have electrical, you have copper, you have AC, and you have, what was the last one?
Plumbing. Yeah, they wanted plumbing.
Standards you would want in a house.
They wanted all that stuff in the house before they'd loan me the money. So what I ended up having to do is, I was living in Watauga at that time, which is about a 45-minute drive from Deep Ellum. So what I ended up having to do is, I was making like $10 an hour at the time. I'm not joking. I was broke. I was paycheck to paycheck, maybe $100 of expendable income a week. What I ended up doing was I bailed on my lease in Watauga. My release over there was like $700 or $800 a month, and I said I just took all my stuff out of the house, put it in a storage unit, and just walked away from my lease. So I ended up hurting my credit a little bit from that, but I walked away from it. But that saved me like $700 a month, $800 a month, and then I could actually not have to drive to Deep Ellum every day. And what I ended up doing is I moved into an REO. I didn't own the house. I just moved into it. And I'm not going to say that anybody gave me permission to do it, but there was some interesting stuff going on at the time.
And he's also not saying you should do that either.
No, you shouldn't do that. But it was the middle of winter. It was probably November-ish, and it was freezing ass cold for Texas. It was like 72 degrees out there. I mean, it froze over that weekend. I remember it freezing over. So I lived in the hot water heater closet with a Coleman lantern to stay warm because it was so freaking cold outside, and the house had no windows in it. It was just frigid freaking cold. No electricity, plumbing, water, or anything like that.
The water closet was like the only room that had...
It was the smallest room, so the Coleman lantern would keep it warm. I'm sure there's probably some CO2 or carbon monoxide problems with...
That explains a lot with your thinking from now on, you know. That's why.
Yeah, sleeping in the closet with a Coleman lantern probably wasn't the smartest of things to do, but what it did is it provided me the opportunity.
On the scale of Daniel's life and on his smart to stupid, I don't think it's the smartest. I don't think it's the stupidest either.
It's not the stupidest.
It's probably mid-range somewhere in there.
Probably not even close to mid-range. It's
probably one of the smarter things.
Probably one of the smarter things I've done. So needless to say, the reason I did that though is it provided me the opportunity to immediately get to working on the house, because once the appraisal was done, I knew what was required from the bank to get the loan. You know, obviously I needed electrical, I needed plumbing, I needed air conditioning, I needed all those types of things. So I went ahead and moved into the hot water heater closet to allow me to start working on this house. It gave me the ability from the time I got off of work till the time I felt like going to bed, working on the house. So I'd started out as an electrician at 13 years old. I'm now 23, so I've got pretty good electrical experience. I've got really good HVAC experience. I just get to work and start repairing all this stuff that's on his list. There's not supposed to be any holes in the walls. So over the next 20 to 30 days, myself, my dad, a couple of my friends, we're over there working on that house around the clock. I'd get off work at 5 or 6 o'clock in the afternoon. I'd work on the house till 3 or 4 or 5 in the morning, and then I'd get 1 or 2 hours of sleep, and then I'd go to work. And since I didn't have any plumbing at the house, I'd just take clothes with me to work. I'd shower in the sink at the office, and I probably didn't smell good for a couple months. But
to be clear, we're not talking about the granite, we're not talking about the lighting, we're not talking about the tile or the carpet. All we're talking about is what was on that guy's list.
Just what was on that list. And literally when he said like there's not supposed to be any holes in the wall, I literally just like what the thieves were doing is they were opening up the receptacles, the plugs on the walls. They're opening up and getting hold of it and just ripping it out of the wall. So there was just strips running up the drywall of just holes where they're stripping the copper out of the house. So I literally was just going back in there with some mud and just packing the hole full of mud. I wasn't doing drywall repair. I was just filling holes up. I'd pack it full of paper and cover it up because my intent was just to get past his list of requirements.
Right.
And then once I got past it, go back through and open the house back up and clean everything up.
Well, once you actually owned it.
Right. So I'm doing all this without owning the house.
Which is, again, not advisable.
Not advisable. Not
Unless it's one of my houses that you want to just fix up, and then never mind.
So yeah, I steam cleaned it and I did all that, and just to not dwell on that story for too long, you know, right before I bought it, the next door neighbor's house caught on fire, and since it's townhomes, the fire department got up on my roof and cut my roof open and sprayed my roof down so that way this fire wouldn't spread. So I had, you know, all the water coming in from the top. I had to patch the roof. I had to redo the ceiling upstairs. It was bad. Needless to say, fast forward 30 days, I was able to get the loan. And there was a lot of stuff in between. I could spend an hour talking about it.
Well, 2 more minutes on this story and then we'll move on. Because I agree with Dan, we don't want to spend the whole time talking about this one story. But my favorite part of the story is you call up the appraiser. The appraiser's like, that's cool, but my appraisal is already locked in stone. And then you call your bank up and be like, well, I paid for that appraisal. And they're like, well, if you want to pay for another one, you get another one.
Right.
So wrapping the story up, you call the bank.
So yeah, that's what I ended up having to do. I called the bank up and I got the appraisal to come back out. The appraiser comes back out and he's not going to let me move forward with the loan. He's just not going to let me move forward with the loan. I'm freaking out. I'm homeless, pretty much living in a bank-owned property. I've put myself into more debt than I'd ever been into in my life because I didn't have any money to buy these materials. I didn't have any of that kind of money. So I had an uncle that was willing enough to loan me $3,000, and at $3,000, that's more than I'd ever seen in my life. I mean, literally $3,000.
At least legally.
Yeah, so
Sorry.
What I ended up having to do is I was freaking out, and I ended up calling the bank up, and I was like on the phone with Gretchen and just freaking out. And she was like, hey, everybody told you up front that this wasn't guaranteed. You took your risks. We all warned you what the risks were. This is unfortunate that this has happened, but the truth is you knew what the risks were going into it, and I had to accept that. So after sitting on the phone with her for 5 to 10 minutes, I don't even know how long I was on the phone with her, I ended up saying something along the lines of, hey, whenever we first got this ball started, I paid you $300 for an appraisal. And she agreed. And I was like, well, if I paid for the appraisal and I hired the appraiser, what's stopping me from hiring a new appraiser and getting a whole new appraisal done? And she sat there kind of in silence on the phone for a moment, and she finally said, I guess nothing. If you pay another $300, we can order a new appraisal. So that's exactly what I did. I ordered a new appraisal. The new appraisal came out, and boom, I got my very first investment property.
And the reason I want him to finish that story is because I think that's the power of real estate and the power of always grinding, always thinking outside the box. Because at the very beginning, there was a no, there was no, there was no, that he kept on going through, pushing through all that to get what he wanted. And even at the very end, they're like, nope, 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 nope. And he's like, loophole. And then again, how many people have ever thought about, oh, well, you're telling me no, why don't I just hire somebody else?
It was...
And I love that story for that reason.
I was just too stupid to know any different. And I think if anybody knows me well, the biggest and easiest way to motivate me is tell me I can't do something. You tell me I can't do something and I want to do it, I'm definitely going to do it. That just adds fuel to the fire.
You can't give me a raise.
All right.